I think there's a debate here, right? Whether, is this all El Nino that we're seeing? Is it climate change? Is it a mix of both? What is it exactly?
Well, it's actually several factors. Also, what's something called the MJO, the Maddie and Julie Oscillation Index, which is a storm that occurs over the Western Pacific, over India and Indonesia, that can actually alter our weather. When it's very intense, that MJO, you tend to have also warm periods as well. That MJO index is going to move east over the next 8 weeks. And as it does, it's going to actually create a little bit of a colder outlook for the Midwest and Northeast over the next few weeks. So natural gas prices have perhaps been looking at this a little bit and bottoming with the recent snows in the southwest U.S. and some colder weather in the outlook. But I don't see any general major global long-term cold weather regime that's going to get the oil market out of the doldrums.
Okay, so you mentioned natural gas and oil. I mean, where else is this El Nino effect? And these other factors you mentioned, where else is this having the biggest impact, Jim?
Well, if you put up the global GDP with El Nino, you'll see that the majority of the countries have a positive effect, a positive GDP effect from El Nino.
Okay, guys, let's bring up that chart that Jim's talking about. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
All right, so you can see that Indonesia, for example, has a lot of problems with weather and reduced crops when we have an El Nino. That's been one factor in helping the cocoa market rally this year, as well as West Africa's drought. But in the United States, for example, GDP actually gets a shot in the arm. Yes, we've had a lot of severe weather, a lot of problems, certainly in woes in the deep south and southwest. But, for example, California's drought, which has helped produce prices soar over 100%, vegetables over the last 2 years, that will get a shot in the arm. That will ease over the next 2 months and actually is a positive effect on GDP, as well as increased housing starts. The last 2 winters, terrible snows in Boston in the east.
Yeah.
Housing starts really declined. But this year, we're going to actually see better weather that's actually good for consumer spending in the retail sector.
So what is going to be the effect? Because that was what we showed, the chart was the effect 1 year after the El Nino effect from prior years, right? So what's going to happen next year then, Jim, exactly?
Well, right now, the main bull markets we've seen in the ag sector has been because of Southeast Asian, West African droughts in sugar and cocoa. I would not necessarily advise jumping into those markets right now, as we've seen about a 25 to 50% rally, particularly sugar, over the last several months. But I think that West Africa's drought, where we have 2/3 of the world's chocolate, cocoa production produced, still has a potential to create a rally this winter, with El Nino affecting that particular part of the world. Now, as we get into the spring and summer, if El Nino weakens, that is when we begin to see global grain production fall. So if El Nino weakens fast enough by, say, May and June,
right,
we would see devastation to crops in our country. But as far as any major bull market, in commodities in general, I've been very bearish, particularly the crude and heating oil market, for a long time. OPEC keeps producing like crazy. Yep. We have the biggest production in this country since 1966. It's going to take a lot, not just El Nino, to get us out of the doldrums in most of these commodities over the next 12 to 18 months.
Right. It'll be a while before oil prices come back by any means. So, Jim, before we go then, did I hear you right? It sounds like, we're bracing now for back to winter weather here in the Northeast. I mean, are weather conditions going to kind of normalize, well, so to speak?
Because of this MJO, this wave, this tropical wave that's over India, amazingly enough, can change the currents thousands of miles away. It's called the butterfly effect. That will bring some colder weather to the Midwest and East, but I don't think it's going to be enough to jumpstart the energy markets that much. All it's creating right now is maybe a floor in the natural gas market. That MJO, though, again, will be a short-lived effect. I think we go back to an El Nino pattern probably late January and February, and back to an overall warmer winter. So I'm not looking for any major catastrophes that will really impact the consumer and retail sector, nor the housing start sector, from consistent snows like we had last winter. Maybe a week or so at most of some colder weather, but nothing like we had the last 2 winters.